A partner with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Taiwo Oyedele, joins me in the studio to look at this. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Many have said moving from 5% to 7.5% VAT is a step to go at this time when the country needs a lot of money from the non-oil sector.
Yes and no.
Good.
Yes, because government needs more money. That's a fact. In fact, now with the MTEF and the budget we're expecting for 2020, we'll need more money. The deficit is already a lot, even with 2018 budget at the level where they are. And this cuts across, even at state level. I think actually the fiscal gap at state level is even bigger than what we have at the federal level. So to that extent, an increase in VAT rate looks like the right thing to do. No, in terms of the increase in VAT rate, is that we have to, one, consider the timing, and then we have to consider the design and the structure of the VAT that we currently have. It is not right to always just compare the headline rates for Nigeria with the headline rate for other African countries or developed countries. Many of those countries have a proper VAT system, which means, for example, you don't have to register for VAT if you're a small business and your turnover is small. You don't have to pay VAT on some basic consumptions, food, medical. We have that in Nigeria, but it's not comprehensive enough. And then you find that also for services, you get input VAT. If you buy assets in many of these other countries, you get credit for the VAT you pay. In Nigeria, you don't. You don't get input credit for assets, you don't get for services. So which means trying to invest in Nigeria and producing is more expensive because our VAT is not a flow-through VAT system. Okay. Ultimately, what we do with the 7.5% will have to go beyond the headline rate itself. It has to be an increase in rate that ensures that the most vulnerable Nigerians don't suffer the impact. Because some studies have it that Nigerians are #1 in the world in terms of the percentage of our household income that we spend on food, which is about 60% average. If we disaggregate it, people at the bottom of the ladder spend more than 100% of their income on food, which means they borrow to feed themselves or they buy food on credit. You cannot afford to impose any taxes on those people. So you need to exempt everything that they consume. At the moment, the law says basic food item is exempt from VAT. The tax authorities, FRS says it's only when the food has not been processed. So when you buy raw yam, you don't pay VAT. But when you buy porridge, you pay VAT. When you buy flour, you don't pay VAT. When you buy bread, you pay VAT. We need to fix that at the same time.
This is really breaking this down further. We've seen moves by the FRS to try and increase, expand the tax net. What I was reading through today and I saw Nigeria's unchanging tax to GDP ratio. We're still over around 6%, despite all of these efforts. What is really happening?
Yeah. So Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio has been about 6% for almost 6-7 years. Since we rebase our GDP. It's been around 6%. And we need to move the needle and get close to about 15%, which is what we need to be able to fund development. FRS has been putting in a lot of efforts. They have been very aggressive in some cases, but really the result is not showing. And here is why. Nigerian governments across levels, state and federal in particular, think that they can make a lot of money from the informal sector. Whereas, I think their focus should be more about the top 1% of society. If you expand your tax base and you capture everybody in the tax net, for planning and analytics purposes, it's useful. But the purpose of raising tax revenue, if people are poor and you put them in a tax net, they just don't have anything to give. You can't give what you don't have. There has to be first and foremost prosperity, employment. Businesses must thrive and then they can pay taxes. When unemployment is rising and businesses are struggling, it is counterintuitive to expect that at the same time you raise tax revenue significantly. This is why we're still hovering at about 6%. And we need to do things fundamentally different to be able to move to the point where we have to be. and it will not happen overnight. I think most times I see Nigerian politicians and government generally being too much in a hurry. They want to fix the tax problem overnight. It's not like a tap that you can just switch on and the water start running. Taxation is like an investment. So government has to invest in the system by designing appropriate policies that are mostly business friendly. The ones that promote commerce, attract both local and foreign investments. The one that give people the indication of signaling. So you signal to them that, we know uncertainties will always be there, but businesses don't like uncertainties that are man-made by governments, especially when they think it's to do with policy inconsistencies. So once we start addressing all of that, we start making more money from taxation. The US is the #1 oil-producing economy in the world. They don't have a national oil company because they have realized that the important thing is to allow the private sector do business, make money, and then pay tax to government. So, Apple, Google, these guys make more money in 3 months than our budget. So if you're paying those taxes to a government, that government will be buoyant. That's what we need to focus on.
It's a two-way now for me. We're saying FRS, you're doing your best. Okay, VAT, we need to properly structure if we're going to go ahead with this. So where do we stand when it comes to raising more funds from non-oil sector? How do we go about this? We have a national tax policy at a time, which I think you're a notable member of that committee that's doing a review on that. How soon are we going to start reaping from this? From the funds from taxation? It's very important. We know what's happening to crude. We know what's happening internationally. So when are we going to get it right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think to be able to get it right, you need different organs of government to work together. You need policies to be right from the Ministry of Finance. You need legislation to be right. In fact, the most significant component of the tax tripod at the moment is our laws. Our laws are very old, they are archaic, they're business unfriendly, they're ambiguous, they're just everything they shouldn't be. So if you start by saying, let's review the tax laws. In the Constitution as well, we need to make changes to the taxing powers of the different levels of government. The FRS made 98% of their revenue last year from only 4 taxes. In the order of petroleum profit tax is #1, companies income tax is #2, value-added tax is #3, education tax is #4. At the state level, more than 90% of their revenue came from one tax, personal income tax. So which means 5 taxes are giving us almost all our revenues, but the number of taxes in Nigeria across all 3 levels of government is over 350 different taxes. A new one was introduced just about a few weeks ago, police fund tax. So the point is, we cannot keep doing the same thing that got us into problem and hope that magically the problem will solve itself. It doesn't work like that. Let's review the Constitution to limit the number of taxes government can impose. My recommendation is not more than 10, given that 5 taxes are giving us all the revenue. And then make sure that you design those tax systems and provisions in the law to encourage investment. Don't tax investment. If you tax investment, you make it more difficult for me to invest. Don't tax production because I'm still trying to produce. You can tax my profits and you can tax consumption. That is what is done in every country. So once we do that, we have to also try and harmonize incentives. We have a lot of arbitrary incentives that, in my view, is eating into the tax base. Waivers here, waivers there. Many of them, I think, are counterproductive because they then set uncertainty for people who are not well connected in government. We also have, at the moment, some loopholes in the law that we can close. For example, if we import a service into Nigeria, you can get away with not paying taxes. Whereas the rest of the world, there's what they call reverse charge. The person importing the service will self-charge the VAT. So these are a few areas where I think government can block the loophole and make some, little gains temporarily. But ultimately, where we make the real significant gain is medium to long term. It will not happen in a few days or a few months.
Interesting. Medium to long term. So we should be hopeful as Nigerians. I want us to delve a little bit as we round up this interview. We just saw the document, the MTF now, it's been pushed forward to the Senate, and we are looking at maybe we're going to have the budget year now coming to normal, January to December cycle. We don't know how possible that will be. But how realistic do you see this document? Talking about the fundamentals. What are your expectations? It's going to be two in one question. And also from this team, I'd like to ask you that question, Professor Doyin Salami's team.
Yes.
What are your expectations putting this two together? We expect that GDP growth should just take it from there. I don't know.
Yes. Now, I think the medium-term expenditure framework has been submitted today, which is good. In terms of the fundamentals, I haven't read the details, but I do know that the benchmark for the price of crude oil is $55, more realistic in my view. Production volume is 2.1 million barrels per day, also more realistic than what we have now.
Okay.
And then the budget is about, I think, 9.7 trillion, almost 10 trillion is what we want to spend at the federal government level. So broadly, I think the MTEV is going in the right direction. The presentation has been done. We now need the National Assembly to do their work, and this is a prelude into submission of the budget for 2020. The tone and the body language that we're getting from the National Assembly gives us some level of hope that they will indeed work on the budget as a matter of priority, as well as the MTEF, and pass it on time, so that hopefully we can come back to this January to December, fiscal year. What do I expect the economic management team to be able to do? Dr. Doyin Salami's committee. I think it's a very brilliant idea. I like the fact that there's a lot of private sector involvement and people with the right knowledge are on the committee. I also like the fact that they're going to be reporting directly to Mr. President. The only request and prayer that I have is that Mr. President should listen to them and take their advice and implement. Because if you don't implement, even the best advice in the world will have zero impact on you. So ultimately, it's about what we do with the knowledge and the advice that we receive that will really make the difference that we're looking for.
Partner President House Co-President Mr. Taiwo Idili, thank you very much. It's always nice having you on the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.